In Murim, a beautiful monastery of the heavenly demon cult hid among the mountains, and its followers trained day after day in the hope of achieving perfection. Or at least get closer to the cult's patriarch, the heavenly demon. In mastery of martial arts and magic, he himself spent more and more days in meditation. It was precisely from his meditation that he was distracted by the appearance from the portal of the first elder of this monastic order, the Demon Fist, who bowed respectfully in greeting. The man said that all 9 sects, orthodox and unorthodox, had already been subjugated by the cult, so why was the heavenly demon inactive? He reproached the mentor for not caring about the concerns of the order. All responsibility fell on the shoulders of the elder. The head of the cult asked him to calm down. The master sternly reminded the Demon Fist that during one of the divine art practices, his soul separated. It was impossible to return to the body. What did carelessness have to do with it? The patriarch added that it was only fun at first. The opportunity to fly to the moon and back is quite funny, but it certainly does not help in worldly affairs. The elder began to cry. He cried that the head of the cult didn't care about the monastery at all, and that the mentor's nerves had given out. He shouted that there was no need to cry. Let him listen to the end. The heavenly demon swung and delivered an incredible blow that should have instantly taken the life of his subordinate, but it did not happen. He continued to kneel, and the patriarch explained that no matter how great a master of the divine arts he was, without a physical body there was no point in it at all. Suddenly, right in the middle of the hall, a black portal appeared, clearly of elemental origin. The old man froze. He did not expect to see this. With each passing second, the portal became larger and larger, and an energy vortex formed around it, which began to draw air from the room inside. The irresistible force became more and more noticeable, and soon, the incorporeal shell of the heavenly demon began to be pulled into the black hole between the planes. The master was outraged by such impudence and cast rock weight, which should have increased his mass to 6 tons, shouting that he couldn't be kidnapped so easily. The problem was that without a body, the spell was completely useless. The patriarch continued to be sucked in. The head of the cult suddenly realized his complete helplessness in the current situation. Tears welled up in his eyes. It was terrible. In an instant, the heavenly demon was completely swallowed up by the portal, after which it began to rapidly shrink in size. The room became quiet and calm again, with only a few bluish flashes of energy, reminding us of what had happened. The world he went to was cruel, especially towards those who were weak. People were quick to accuse each other of weakness and worthlessness. If there was a drama and someone died or was injured, some spineless, good-natured person was always to blame. This was Hyun-soo, who woke up in his room from a nightmare. At first his colleagues made fun of him, and then his brother called for help. The guy screamed. He sat up in bed, continuing to keep his mouth open. Although he already understood that it was just a dream, reality still did not please him. With the thought that he was tired of life, of memories, and of his own worthlessness, the hero sat on the bed for several hours, practically without changing his position. The past appeared as if those 2 years that separated the terrible events from our days had never happened. Then portals to other worlds appeared all over the earth, and monsters came out of them. Hundreds of monsters destroyed everyone and everything that came their way. Not a single corner of the planet remained unnoticed by them. Humanity defended itself using the best weapons. The most powerful countries used the most modern and powerful developments. It was all in vain. Against the countless hordes of monsters, all these weapons turned out to be almost completely useless. Humanity was threatened with complete destruction, and then Mother Nature herself took on the role of savior, and superpowers began to awaken en masse in people. The greatest concentration of power allowed one to resist monsters, and so S-rank hunters emerged, gaining enormous power and respect. At first they managed to defend themselves from monsters. Soon special shields appeared, people mastered magic and spells. Soon attack weapons appeared, the number of monsters gradually decreased, and the number of hunters increased. Ultimately, this war ended with the victory of humans, and S-rank hunters were recognized as the highest class, enjoying unlimited powers. Among them were ranged warriors, tanks, healers, and there were also magicians, each using their special gift to the maximum. But we are much more interested in what happened to the people whose special abilities did not manifest, to ordinary people like Hyun-soo, who woke up from a nightmare in his room. Park Hyun-soo became a support. His duties included providing information and other services to hunters during the clearing of monsters. There was little work, and the boy was living from hand to mouth. But the worst thing was that he could no longer pay for his brother's hospital stay, which he had just received a message about. Due to the lack of hospital beds and the guy's huge debt, his brother was doomed to die a long and painful death at home. The hero was overcome with despair. Park Hyun-soo couldn't do anything, but he thought that if the patient didn't have a guardian, the state would take care of him. But suddenly, the guy felt a movement of air behind his back and froze. It was a black portal, the same as the one we saw in Murim, the monastery of the heavenly demon cult, but now it did not draw space inward, but emitted energy outward. The young man began to be literally blown away by a powerful stream of air. It seemed that a little more and he would be left without a face. Park Hyun-soo screamed, calling for help. Meanwhile, the already familiar to us heavenly demon appeared from the portal, or rather his disembodied shell, which moved to another world. He flew out as quickly as a bullet and crashed straight into the solar plexus of the owner of the room, knocking him off his feet. The landing, fortunately, was quite soft. Both fell onto the hero's unfolded bed, so although they were scared, they were not injured. The boy asked the old man in horror who he was, and the heavenly demon was surprised to discover that Park Hyun-soo was not only able to see him, but also felt his touch. The incident made the young man jump back, hitting the wall painfully. He was simply horrified by what was happening. The hero shouted that if the old man who broke into the apartment was trying to rob him, then he was in the wrong place. There was absolutely nothing to steal. Not paying the slightest attention to his cries, the patriarch looked around, trying to figure out where he was and where the portal had moved him. He even rose into the air to get a better look at the situation. Park Hyun-soo looked at what was happening in surprise, not understanding how a person was able to float in the air. The guy asked if the old man was a hunter. He didn't understand what he was talking about, but he was interested in the computer monitor. The master had never seen anything like it before. He was still incorporeal. His hand passed through the screen. The guy was screaming at that time for the ghost of death to spare him. He changed his mind about dying. He needed to protect his brother. A flick on the nose silenced him. The sky demon did not like that he was first called a thief and now a ghost of death. Here he was surprised to discover that he could actually touch the guy, but why only him remained unclear. It was necessary to think about what the reason could be. The patriarch was lost in thought, tugging at his long gray beard. It was necessary to check on other people. The demon headed towards the door. Park Hyun-soo shouted after him that it wouldn't hurt to open them first. There were many surprises waiting for the sky demon on the street. He had never been to a metropolis before, and had never seen cars. The old man was most interested in how these horseless carts could move at high speed. This was definitely not his native middle plane. He had to ask someone where he ended up, but passers-by did not see the demon. He came very close to the guy in glasses, but he didn't notice it at all, and he also failed to touch the passerby. It became obvious that the heavenly demon was only material for the boy in the room the portal led him to. It was necessary to immediately return there and continue exploring my capabilities in this world and in interaction with the hero. He had just finished covering the black hole of the portal in the wall with paper and tape. Although it wasn't a reliable barrier, it was somehow calmer. The guy thought that this was most likely a portal, and therefore he should report its appearance to the city authorities. Then the phone rang, and Park Hyun-soo jumped at the sound. He needed to get down to business and not waste time on nonsense. Too many problems had accumulated. Hunter Kim Hok's son called, one of the best in the city. It was unexpected, but very nice. It was about work. The hunter needed a sap ort to work on clearing a new portal. The young man happily agreed to come to the specified location as soon as possible. Hyun-soo decided that this was a sign of fate. It was definitely not time to die yet. But the portal was Class B, which meant he had to prepare as much as possible. A voice from behind said that in his area, those who chatted to themselves were called holy fools. It was the old man again. The guy started yelling. The hero screamed so loudly that he did not understand why he came back, that the doors of all the neighbors on the floor shook. The sky demon replied that he himself was not thrilled with the prospect of ending up in this wretched hut, but apparently it was destined for him. Noticing that the guy was packing his things, the master asked where he was going. Hyun-soo replied that a portal had opened and he should help the hunter. When he returned, he would like to find the apartment empty. He was surprised to realize that the old man didn't know what portals and hunters were. The guy was already on the stairs when he added that he would call the police if the uninvited guest didn't leave his home. Saying that if he got there on foot, the sun would set, the old man grabbed him by the collar of his jacket and dragged him up. The patriarch used the heavenly demon wing spell and lifted the young man into the air to fly around the city. The people on the street froze. The sight was quite unusual even in a world where monsters had appeared. Passers-by decided that they were looking at an awakened hunter. Park Hyun-soo begged to go downstairs. It was not his plan to attract unnecessary attention to himself, and he was scared. Finding himself above the bus station, he shouted to the old man that they had already arrived at the right place, and that he should at least come down to earth here. It didn't take much to tell him twice. The sky demon loosened his fingers, and our hero fell to the sidewalk like a sack of potatoes. Having risen to his feet, he realized that his vestibular system was not ready for such attractions. Coping with the nausea turned out to be difficult. Soon, the required bus began to travel its route, first along the streets of the metropolis, but the final destination was far outside the city. Hyun-soo was visibly nervous. He had accepted the job offer impulsively, and now he was thinking that the B-level portals were indeed very dangerous. But if he survives, there will be enough money to pay off the hospital debt. Then the old man's voice interrupted his thoughts with a question about where they were going. The heavenly demon hung from the ceiling of the bus, and after listening to the boy's scream, explained that some force was constantly returning him to it. Realizing that the conversation would not take place, the patriarch simply continued his journey, looking around the surroundings. He himself wanted to stop it. They finally arrived at Gangdong-gu in the Ilcha Mountains. At the peak where the portal opened, they were distributing equipment to the supports. The hunters were about to arrive. Everyone received one box. People were noticeably nervous, but our hero was much more worried than the others, because some kind of ghost had followed him. Soon the heroes arrived. They had to enter first. The portal was quite large and had a rectangular shape, like most of those that did not appear spontaneously. Kim Hak-seong announced through a megaphone that he would be leading the operation, which would consist of 1 B-class hunter, 4 C-class hunters, and 5 supports. Yaren, a B-class hunter, reminded that the portal was dangerous, so experienced participants in the operation should keep an eye on the newcomers. The supports started to get equipment, and Park Hyun-soo heard 2 of them admit that they only agreed to this job to see the huntress. She was their idol. Here the young man heard a familiar voice saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, but now they would quickly catch up. Choi Jun-sung, a B-class hunter, asked him how he had the nerve to continue being a support after what the guy did in the last operation. This bastard beat our hero more than once, although this was his style of communication with all supports without exception. Choi Jun-sung had a habit of provoking people and then beating them up because they didn't get his joke. Once he put Hyun-soo out of action for a month for no reason. The guy tried to cover himself with his hands, expecting a jab, but the hunter just laughed, saying that instead of being surprised, he should have said hello. He leaned over to the young man and asked who had called him to invite him to take part in the operation, and he replied that it was Kim Hak-sun. The hero finally received a blow to the solar plexus with a request to try to make sure that this time everything goes better than the previous one. While he was clearing his throat, Choi Jun-sung walked towards the portal, adjusting his hair with a satisfied expression. The old man noticed that the hunter was some kind of extremely unpleasant guy, to which he received the explanation that he was always causing problems and blaming others for it. The heavenly demon hit the young man on the back so hard that he started coughing again. This was completely unexpected. The guy indignantly asked what was wrong. Everyone around started whispering that Park Hyun-soo had gone crazy and was talking to himself. The master called him a disgrace. The signal to begin the operation was given, and all participants moved towards the barrier separating the portal from their world. The hunters were the first to step into the unknown. They had done this many times, but despite their outward confidence, they could not shake off their inner anxiety. Our hero and his ghostly companion also entered. Park Hyun-soo thought that no matter how many times he had to do this in the past, it was impossible to get used to it. The patriarch thought that the sensations when passing through the portal were the same as when he was sucked into the world of this boy. Soon everything ended. They got out on the other side. The group took a few steps into another world. The ground beneath their feet was dry. It seemed they should prepare to meet the monsters of the desert. The operation leader asked the support to conduct an analysis of the territory to understand what could be expected here. The girl took out the equipment and activated the echolocators to hear better. She put on headphones. The Sky Demon advised the youth to go ahead and explore the area on his own, but Park Hyun-soo replied that it was against the rules. The old man was indignant that the hero could not take a step without an order, and he was just a porter, so the young man had absolutely nothing to say in response to this. The demon added that although there was a desert on the surface, he felt the movement of underground waters. The hero laughed that one should not pretend to be an oracle. The support girl turned to the commander and said that the essence of this world is water, even though it may seem strange, but that is exactly what the device shows. Choi Jun-sung accused her of making the measurements wrong, to which he received a negative answer. The beauty was confident that she was right. While the hunter was indignant that such a result was impossible, the ground beneath his feet cracked, and a stream of water rushed upward in a wave. The pressure was so strong that some of the supports had to jump to the sides, screaming to protect their equipment. Together with the water, mermaids armed with sharp spears appeared from under the ground, and with loud, warlike cries, they launched an attack on the people. The participants in the operation, who had no such experience, fled in terror, but the monsters quickly caught up with them. The man with the mustache commanded the newcomers to stick to the hunters, and everyone else to take care of themselves. The monsters were not only well armed, but also had sharp, dangerous teeth, which also did not inspire optimism. Their movements were fast, and soon the people were forced to retreat quickly or give battle to the mermaids. Everyone acted based on previous experience, but there was not a single participant in the operation who was not surprised by the sudden attack in the first minutes of the raid. Some were injured. Park Hyun-soo shouted that the first minutes after passing the portal should be safe. He was indignant that everything did not go according to plan. The hunter he was supporting reached out for the spear. The guy hesitated a little, thinking that they were barely coping. At this time, the mermaid attacked him with a trident, but instead of parrying the blow with the spear he was holding, Park Hyun-soo simply screamed loudly. He fell backwards onto the ground, dropping the weapon he was supposed to hand over to the hunter. This was unacceptable. Kim Hak-sun was attacked by two opponents at once, and the spear was left lying under his feet a few meters from its owner. The mermaid's weapon pierced the guy's bulletproof vest as if it were ordinary clothing. The hero was scared and did not know how best to act. It became obvious that he would have to act, but the only question that remained was how exactly, because the guy was seriously confused. And what could he do against the huge monster that hung right over him, armed with a hefty harpoon? Another second and Park Hyun-sung would have been a wet spot, but he managed to move back a little, avoiding the blow. It was obvious that this was only a temporary solution. Sweat was pouring down the young man's face like hail. He bit his lip. The huge harpoon rose into the air again to fall upon the completely defenseless enemy. The monster looked terrifying, his weapon too. But the worst thing was that this mermaid moved incredibly fast. It seemed like Hyun-sung was about to face death again, but at the last moment the monster suddenly lost its head. On the platform stood the heavenly demon, who had just discovered through experience that he could still fight monsters in an incorporeal shell. The old man muttered under his breath that times were different now. He had to fight some fishmen. Let the boy watch and pay attention. It's not often you see a master in battle. He easily dodged the harpoon strike and prepared to make a lightning-fast counterattack to get rid of his opponent. On the other side, a trident fell upon the heavenly demon, but even here the attack failed. The man was faster. He used his signature punch, and the mermaid was completely unable to participate in the battle. Another one, armed with a spear, approached closely to avenge his fallen comrades, his eyes burning with fire. The patriarch used some kind of spell and blew in the direction of the enemy, and no one else attacked him from that side. But the mermaid attacked from the opposite side, receiving a blow from the palm and a comment about how one would have to grow 1,000 years to inflict even a scratch on the heavenly demon. The enemy turned out to be stronger than expected and did not leave this blow unanswered, charging his fist at the old man. The patriarch used magic and simply stopped his limbs in mid-flight. It wasn't that difficult. The next spell, Flash of Chaos, was supposed to destroy all enemies within a radius of 45 meters. The mermen had no chance of revenge for their dead relatives. The old man gathered all his strength and raised his fist, concentrating the energy as much as possible in one point. The explosion was so powerful that the flash blinded everyone around for a few seconds, and the silhouette of the heavenly demon became huge. The defeated enemies scattered in all directions, some of them having slightly less of certain body parts. The people were not hurt. They continued to fight, but were quite surprised by what happened, not understanding who was using such powerful magic. Park Hyun-soo even froze. He also didn't expect that the ghost that followed him would turn out to be such a powerful warrior. He stood at the very epicenter of the explosion, having assumed his usual dimensions, completely unharmed, although the point here was that the old man did not have a material shell. Thus, no one except our hero saw him. The hunters decided that this guy had destroyed a good half of the enemies. But this is impossible. He is just a simple man. It turned out that this was not the end yet. A mermaid boss appeared from underground, a huge and very ferocious monster that roared loudly. The heavenly demon was delighted. He finally had at least a somewhat interesting opponent. The old man called him the Fish Prince and even decided to say hello, although all these formalities were more likely necessary for him personally. Saying that the enemy had the honor of dying at the hands of the master, the patriarch prepared to deliver a crushing blow with a fist enveloped in chi energy. The Fish Prince bared his disgusting teeth, and either glowing mucus or flame appeared in his mouth. It was difficult to tell. The heavenly demon made his strike, but the hand passed through the enemy, something he could not have foreseen in advance. The master realized that he had spent all his chi energy to the last drop, and now again could not inflict the slightest damage on the monsters. They continued to advance. One of the mermaids was already ready to jump on Park Hyun-soo, who was hiding behind the same rock. The guy was completely confused, and when the monster attacked, he didn't react at all, dooming himself to certain death. Only at the last moment did the young man remember that he had protective magic and managed to put up a block. This saved him, but not too much. He simply didn't have the strength left for another such trick, and besides, the blow sent him flying several meters to the side. Hyun-soo lay on the ground and thought that he wouldn't even move. He would die, so it was destined to be so. And yet the thought of his brother did not allow him to give up. The guy tried to get up to find at least some shelter. The mermaids continued to attack. Our hero again bent down to the ground. He was swaying and just wanted to bury himself somewhere in the sand, like an ostrich. Then a familiar voice said that if the young man didn't get up right now, he would simply die. And so it happened. The huge mermaid struck exactly where our hero had just been lying. He screamed in fear, realizing that he had survived only thanks to the old man. The heavenly demon pointed out the direction of Hyun-soo's movement with his foot, while also giving him a light kick to speed up the pace so that he wouldn't be too careless. The monster just jumped to where the young man was, and he rolled to the side practically from under his feet. While the monster made another jump, the guy crawled away a little more. It seemed he began to understand how the tactic of dodging blows worked, but it couldn't last forever. While Park Hyun-soo was thinking about what to do, the patriarch saved him from the mermaid's next blow. He was not delighted, but still helped the hero. And yet the young man had to learn to cope on his own, so he received a hefty kick in the ass with the words that it was time to finish off this annoying fishman. The monster's eyes glowed with fire, and saliva began to drip from its mouth. Apparently, it was already imagining how it was eating the annoying boy. When the teeth were right next to his face, the hero could not bear it and began to cry again. After all, he really lacked fighting spirit. The old man shouted that the monster only looked powerful. He had very thin bones. If he broke his collarbone, everything would go like clockwork. The hero prepared to follow the instructions. He closed his eyes and hit the right spot with all his might. There was no choice. Otherwise, he would simply be eaten alive. The blow turned out to be quite strong. The master advised hitting with elbows when fighting in close combat, and it worked. The first blow was followed by a second one, which was much easier to do, and little by little the guy gained courage. After the third blow, the enemy fell to the ground. Following the instructions of the mentor, it turned out to be quite possible to defeat the enemy, but this was not the end yet. The heavenly demon ordered Park Hyun-soo to finish off the monster, otherwise it would quickly regenerate and devour them all. While the boy was trying to comprehend that he had just killed the mermaid with his bare hands, the old man was already preparing his next order. It was necessary to take the spear and finish the job. The spear was excellent, practically new and quite light. The hero took the weapon with an awkward gesture. He had never killed a living creature before. He needed to gather his courage. Slugs, of course, don't count. Such a monster had to be killed with one strong blow, calculating the trajectory well. The master reminded him that he needed to do everything quickly, otherwise the creature would rise and devour him, and his comrades could use some help. The hunters fought with all their might. The men worked in pairs, but they had almost no control over the situation. Ayarin had a lighter workload, and the girl was able to keep her area under control, but everything could change at any moment. Our hero suddenly felt quite clearly that he was now in a real war against monsters. He remembered how 2 years ago he was riding in a car with his parents and brother. Nothing foreshadowed the tragedy. But suddenly a huge purple monster emerged from right under the highway, and their car, like a toy, flew off the road and flipped over. The last time the boy saw his parents alive was then. They were screaming in fear, realizing that they could die themselves and lose their children. His mother and father died that day, and the hero's heart sank at the thought, and then began to pound madly, anticipating revenge. Remembering that his brother was currently in the hospital and that he needed to get money to pay for it, Park Hyun-soo decided to take action. Shouting that it was all because of people like this vile monster, he raised his spear high above his head and raised his hands to strike. The guy put all his strength and all his hatred into it, and in order not to be afraid of the sight of blood, he closed his eyes tightly. It was his first time killing. A bright blue glow illuminated him, and a message appeared that the hero had managed to overcome the difficulties. Park Hyun-soo realized that this was an awakening. He had just discovered his gift, his superpowers. It was incredible. A table with his parameters and characteristics immediately appeared, but what the hero read in it shocked him. It was so hard to wrap his head around that the young man's eyes almost popped out of their sockets from disappointment. His unique ability turned out to be following clues. It is impossible to even imagine a more pitiful talent. The battle was very difficult. The hunters were exhausted and could barely stand on their feet. Choi Jun-sung was even slightly unsteady. Quite a few monsters were destroyed, but there were also casualties among the supports. Continuing the operation meant endangering the lives of the others. Why monsters of such a level appeared in the Class B portal remained unclear. Apparently, the intelligence service had misjudged the situation. the hunters decided to retreat. They had to leave to avoid dying a senseless and terrible death. Yeren gave the order to retreat and called on everyone who could stand on their feet to help the wounded. People began to slowly move towards the exit. Someone poked a spear into the corpses of the fishmen, falling into hysterics from what they had experienced. Park Hyun-soo escaped without injury, but he couldn't comprehend that he had gotten into such a mess. It was the first time he could remember. Looking at the heavenly demon, the boy suddenly clearly realized that without his help, he had no chance of surviving today. Then the leader of the squad called out to him and said that after they were safe, they needed to talk. Our hero was frightened, deciding that the boss wanted to reprimand him and assign him a punishment, which would be very unpleasant. Even as he passed through the portal, he could not shake off the obsessive thought that he had done something wrong and would now be left without a salary. But then his wounded comrade groaned, and Hyun-soo decided that he had no reason to worry, because this time everything was done without any mistakes. Soon, small waves appeared on the other side of the portal in the human world, which meant that the operation participants were about to arrive. The Hunters Association decided to honor the dead posthumously, and before heading to the city, they observed a minute of silence in their memory. The hunters who returned from the raid bowed their heads in sorrow, each of them realizing that some of the responsibility for these deaths was on their shoulders. Choi Jun-sung was more depressed than the others because he was worried about his image, and such an incident would clearly affect his career. Suddenly, Kim Hak-sung ended his speech by saying that despite all the pain, one should welcome the awakened one. There was applause, but all our hero could think about was how the boss found out that he had developed superpowers because everyone was busy fighting. So that's what the squad leader wanted to talk about. Well, now all that was left was to pack and hand over the equipment because it was the property of the association. Packing boxes was even pleasant. It helped to distract myself and forget about the nightmare I had just experienced in reality. Then someone's hand fell on Hyun-soo's shoulder. It was Choi Jun-sung, who whispered that the boy shouldn't be too happy. He added that the world was definitely going crazy, and our hero was thinking about what the villain was planning and why he had approached him. The man slapped the guy on the cheeks and said in a nasty voice that someone had died and someone had woken up. That's how it happens. After which the hunter asked what ability Park Hyun-soo had awakened in himself, but the hero didn't really want to answer. The people around also listened. They didn't like that Jun-sun was pestering the support again, but they were also interested to know what gift the new awakened one had. The guy thought for a moment about whether he should voice this information to everyone, but then he exhaled and said that his ability was following clues. The hunter puffed out his cheeks with laughter and began to make obscene sounds. The others also couldn't hold back their smiles. Someone even laughed loudly. After Jun-sung burst out laughing, no one could hold back anymore. Following the prompts sounded simply ridiculous. Park Hyun-soo didn't want to be a laughing stock, so an old man approached him and asked if he understood correctly that the boy was embarrassed by his newfound ability. He asked the patriarch to be quiet. Jun-sung heard and asked if the support had gone crazy after waking up. To test this, the hunter immediately offered to test the young man's superpower right then and there. Following the hints was automatically activated, and the sky demon prompted the hero to take a step back. He followed the order just in time, the hunter's fist whistling a few centimeters from the tip of the boy's nose. Choi Jun-sung was not prepared for this. Usually there were no problems with hitting a support. The statistics message appeared that Hyun-soo's attack power had increased by 15%, which was just in time because his opponent had decided to have a real fight. He raised his hand to strike, preparing to get even with the awakened one. The guy froze in place, waiting for the old man's next hint. She didn't keep herself waiting long. The patriarch advised her to perform a tiger squat to the left and an attacking punch from below to the right. Noticing that Hyun-soo didn't understand, the demon initiated the recording of this technique in his mind in order to master the new skill. The hero felt that time had stopped. These skills were being embedded in his memory. The lightning strike was especially noticeable. The enemy didn't give him a chance to wait long and attacked. The support performed a tiger crouch, dodging his attack. It was time to counterattack, and Hyun-soo prepared his hand to try out the newly recorded technique. All that had to be done was to allow the brain to use the information received, and the young man did just that. He was so fast and the blow so strong that he threw the hunter, who did not have time to defend himself, back several meters. Right in the middle of his protective armor, a rather noticeable dent had now formed, and Jun Xiong was completely surprised. His fall was simply epic. The man flipped several times in the air, each time hitting his head on the ground. Finally, he lay sprawled on the grass, unable to move. Who would have thought that someone who had just woken up would be able to fight like that? The crowd also did not hide their delight. With one blow, the former support completely defeated the B-rank hunter. The leader of the raiding party hurried to check if Jun Xiong's pulse was normal, but he continued to lie motionless. After making sure that his subordinate was alive, Kim Hak-sun ordered doctors to be called, and the crowd gradually continued to grow. Our hero couldn't believe that he had just made such an incredible blow. He held his hand by the wrist, as if not believing in the reality of what was happening. The leader approached him and called him by name, reminding him that the use of force against a senior colleague could result in criminal liability. Then he leaned closer and whispered with a smile that he would pretend not to notice anything the first time. The hunter also added that he would put in a good word for the hero in the association. He should be assigned a class. Everyone was delighted that the support had beaten Jun Xiong. Here, a pleasant female voice expressed congratulations to Hyun-soo. The guy looked around, not believing his ears. It was Ayarin. The girl extended her hand, greeting the awakened one, and said that she really hoped that they would work well together in the future. The huntress turned around and left. The hero's heart was pounding like crazy. The old man playfully asked if the young man really liked this maiden so much. The young man shouted that not at all. Let the old man not talk nonsense. The girl looked back, not understanding why the support was arguing with himself so emotionally. Here, Park Hyun-soo thoughtfully rubbed his chin and turned to the heavenly demon with a question, who irritably said that he should tell it like it is, and not beat around the bush. Then the hero fell to his knees before him and folded his hands in a pleading gesture. He asked the mentor to take him as a student. The answer was silence, and the young man repeated his request to be taught martial arts. He bowed even lower, deciding that he was not being respectful enough when he repeated his request for the third time to be accepted as a student. Finally, Park Hyun-soo's patience snapped, and he indignantly asked why the old man was not answering, and he said that he simply did not want to be his teacher. The heavenly demon explained that he no longer takes on students at all, since if he did this, he would not have time to practice martial arts himself. Here the young man asked in surprise what was the point of him practicing something without a physical shell. The patriarch froze. He constantly forgot about his own incorporeality. The hero continued to insist that the mentor had said several times that he was incredibly bored, so why then complain about the lack of time? The icing on the cake was the reminder that if the young man died, the demon would not be able to return to where he came from. The heavenly demon thought that there was a grain of truth in this. The boy was so helpless in the portal that without him he would have certainly died. The patriarch asked what would happen if he trained the hero and he became a hunter. Would this allow freedom of movement? The hero asked what he meant, portals or something else. The old man replied that he was talking about all worlds. The guy explained that if he reached rank A, he would be given freedom of movement, and if rank S, he would become untouchable. No one would be able to challenge him. The master raised his hand and shouted that in that case he was untouchable. Hyun-soo noticed that he was catching on quickly. The old man, bending over in a jump, commanded the hero to go through the ritual of 9 bows. He did not understand what he was talking about. The demon explained that he was taking him as a student, let him bow 9 times. The guy beamed with happiness and joy. But then his face was distorted with fear. Park Hyun-soo looked around and noticed that there were many people around. The mentor said that it was now or never. If he really wanted to learn something, he had to ignore the opinions of others, and our hero decided to do it. The young man began to bow, repeating his request to become his teacher, and this could not fail to attract the attention of the crowd. Iaren said that the guy seemed to be not all there, to which the squad leader muttered that it was from stress, and that he would soon be back to normal. By evening, Park Hyun-soo returned home. He was very exhausted, but incredibly happy with the past day. But as soon as he crossed the threshold of the apartment, he ran into trouble. The old man shouted in a voice that was not his own, that his foot would not step into this filth. He rose into the air and ordered the student to clean up immediately. The boy muttered something about it being better to wait until tomorrow. He was tired. The old man was adamant and had to urgently grab a rag. Moreover, the heavenly demon closely monitored that there was no dust left in the corners. Here he also noticed sheets of paper on the wall, immediately wondering why they were there. The young man was confused. Having shown the portal, the hero said that he was scared to look at it, but now it's somehow calmer. The master looked thoughtfully into the black void and chuckled loudly. It seemed that an interesting idea had come to his mind. A moment later, the patriarch was already diving into the portal, as if he hadn't just asked him to start cleaning the apartment. In the end, all that was left was the hand tugging at Park Hyun-soo's sleeve, and a loud voice commanding him to follow. Soon, both were floating in the space between worlds, neither of them knowing where this path would lead them. When they went outside, the old man said that the place was very strange. He felt only emptiness and nothing else. The guy sat down in fear. When he finally gathered his courage and stood up, the teacher informed him that this was a great place to undergo a life and death test, and the hero became scared again. He tried to clarify, but the teacher simply ordered him to take off his shirt and sit down. He was adamant, and the young man had to obey. Hyun-soo sat there, sweating from the tension, and the mentor sat behind him, preparing to begin. The heavenly demon folded his hands and entered into deep meditation. A bright blue glow began to spread around him. When enough energy had accumulated in his palms, the master placed his hands on the guy's back, continuing to remain in maximum concentration of consciousness. He explained that he was currently busy tuning the student's meridians and energy nodes. It was necessary for the energy currents in his body as well as his blood circulation to function properly. The heavenly demon added that if he was uncomfortable, then there could be no talk of any studies. It would be much more difficult from now on. The hero gritted his teeth and decided to endure. Soon it became difficult to hold back. The young man quietly moaned. Apparently this was far from the end. The master rained ice and flames down on his back. The old man's eyes became completely insane, and powerful streams of chi energy passed through his mind. The guy turned red, his eyes rolled back, and a grimace of pain froze on his face. He turned completely red from the strain. Saying that he had come across a surprisingly stable body, the heavenly demon performed a few more additional claps with his palms. Hyun-soo almost fell on his face from these blows, but he still continued to endure the test set by his mentor. The old man announced that it was time for the final ritual, after which he directed both palms towards the young man's shoulder blades. Streams of white energy were spreading from underneath them, hitting the guy in the back so hard that he started coughing. The young man leaned forward, trying to cope with the effects of the powerful force passing through his body. The heavenly demon looked at the disciple with respect. He had not seen such a strong and resilient body for a long time. Looking at every muscle on Park Hyun-soo's back, the patriarch thought that the chakra cleansing had taken surprisingly little time. Our hero was still trying to catch his breath after the procedure, but it was clear that he was already feeling much better. Only emotional impressions remained. The old man asked if everything was okay, to which the student shouted that he miraculously survived. He thought his time had come. The boy continued to noisily inhale and exhale air. His mentor thought that this body was ideal for martial arts, but lived in a time when they were consigned to oblivion. There was nothing else to do in this world, so the two used the portal to return to Hyun-soo's apartment. The young man suddenly felt an incredible lightness. All his fatigue seemed to have vanished, which he did not fail to report. The master looked back at him, frowning slightly. He arrogantly stated that this was the effect of clearing the spells that were clogged. The hero continued to lunge with his hand. The young man clenched his fists and tensed his leg muscles, feeling so light that it felt like he could fly up to the ceiling. Just for fun, Park Hyun-soo tried to jump and suddenly hit his head on the chandelier. The teacher rolled his eyes. While his protege was trying to pull his head out of the interior ceiling, the foreman said that he had forgotten to tell him something. Folding his arms across his chest, he solemnly informed the hero that he had shared with him his own chi energy, a piece of the divine mastery of the heavenly demon. The young man finally freed his head from the hole in the ceiling and now fell to the floor, even managing to ask in mid-flight what it was like. The master added that this was, frankly speaking, very dangerous, and he was still amazed that the man survived, and he cried out indignantly. There were quite a few complaints. Not only did he not warn me about anything, but he also almost killed me. The teacher probably went completely crazy. Saying that he shouldn't raise his voice to the master, the old man gave his protege a flick and he flew back, somersaulting several times. The hero quickly rose to his feet and asked what the heavenly demon would do if he killed him, to which he reasonably noted that he hadn't killed him. Looking at the guy's table, the patriarch said that if he had not been able to withstand the particle of divine energy, he would not have been able to begin training. This is the only technique available to mortals. Everyone around was sleeping. The light was on in Hyun-soo's room. The master added that this was a very powerful technique. With it alone, he could not have become his student. The next morning, the awakened one went straight to the research center to get accurate information about his powers and assign a suitable rank. There was a pretty girl sitting at the reception desk. It was even a bit of a shame to distract her, but the guy loudly said hello. Business could not wait. The beauty smiled and happily asked how she could help. Park Hyun-soo introduced himself and explained that Hunter Kim Hak-sun was supposed to sign him up for an assessment. Suddenly the girl threw up her hands and with an admiring face exclaimed that she was very glad to see the hero. She did not expect that it was him. She even asked to take a selfie with him, although the guy had no idea what he was so famous for. Was it really because of Jun-sung? The beauty said that the hero should go down to the -5th floor, where the appraisal department is located. Let him ask the boss, the chief appraiser, Nok-soo. In the elevator, the guy felt really uneasy, but the master ordered him to control himself and not to be afraid. He had to get a rank to become his student. The elevator doors opened, and the young man walked down the corridor, trying to find the right door, or at least someone to ask about Nok-soo. There was a huge window on the wall into the room where the test was taking place. Someone hit the apparatus so hard that steam started pouring out. The hero's face stretched out. Behind the glass was a girl in a special suit who completed the task with a loud sound, and it was the sound that attracted the guy's attention. The scoreboard showed 867. It was a good result. At least Hyun-soo thought it was quite high. The one who tested the girl thought so too. He joyfully waved his hand and shouted that it was a great hit. The man in the cap continued to admire the beauty's capabilities, repeating several times that 867 was simply incredible. She began to rub her hands excitedly, saying that she could knock out even more, if only they would give her the opportunity. But the chief appraiser Jong Nok-soo expressed his opinion that she was a B rank, no more, and in order to get an A rank, she needed to hit 900 units or more. This information angered the awakened one, and she put her hands on her hips, as if hinting that there was very little left to reach this figure. Our hero knocked quietly on the door, and the man turned towards the sound, trying to figure out who had decided to disturb them. Noticing the guy, Nok-soo looked out of the room, inviting him to come in, because this was, apparently, Hyun-soo, whom they were waiting for. The appraiser noticed that the hero came a little early, but Hunter Hak-sun warned him, so everything is fine. He informed his colleague that Park Hyun-soo had arrived, so he would have to finish with the girl himself. The guy in the cap greeted our hero, noting that it was a great honor for him, but the young man continued to wonder what caused such reverence towards his modest person. The evaluators noticed his lack of understanding, and explained that rumors about how the former support taught Jun-sung a lesson spread very quickly, and everyone had already heard about his exploits. Remembering the selfie with the receptionist, Chensu understood why she wanted to take it, and everything began to fall into place. Here, the awakened one reminded us of herself and asked when they would continue testing. Saying that they were already starting, Nok-san called Hyun-soo to follow him, and Assistant Kim took care of the girl. On the way, the subjects met each other's eyes. An undisguised interest was noticed in the beauty's eyes, and this somewhat embarrassed our hero. He was not used to increased attention. The heavenly demon immediately began to interrogate the student about his unhealthy fear of women. The guy vaguely explained that it had simply seemed that way to him. At the sound of his voice, the awakened one looked around in bewilderment. Realizing that from the outside, it looked like he was talking to himself again, Hyun-soo became even more embarrassed. The girl walked further down the corridor, asking Kim's assistant if this strange guy was really awakened. She waved her hand menacingly and noted that in that case they could meet in battle, or simply become colleagues. After putting on the special suit for the tests, Hyun-soo was embarrassed again. The outfit was too tight. The old man also did not like the uniform. He called the suit ugly, noting that clothes should hide the loins and not vice versa. Saying that in that case it would be better to be completely naked, the heavenly demon left the room. The young man was also outraged. In the punch test room, he stood in front of the same apparatus that the previous awakened had worked with and announced that he was ready. So far, the light above the results board was simply red, and instead of numbers there were zeros, but that's only for now. The old man ordered to feel his dantian and concentrate the chi energy as much as possible. The guy tried to follow the instructions as clearly as possible. The master explained that the power he put into the lightning strike he learned yesterday came from there, so he could show an even higher result. A message appeared that Follow Hints was activated and added 15% to damage. The young man reported that he felt the power filling him. But it was necessary not only to obtain energy from the Dangtan, but also to group it into the desired flow. Park Hyun-soo made several movements with his hand, checking how the chi energy was distributed throughout his body. Everything was fine, and the boy wrapped his fist in chi, then raised his hand to strike, swinging it wide. His fist hit the testing apparatus with such force that at first it was unclear whether it would hold. The energy filled the ball with light, which was supposed to visually demonstrate the force of the impact. The glass almost burst. Jong Nok-soo couldn't believe his eyes and even looked out from behind the partition to get a better look at the result of the awakening. The scoreboard showed the number 1,120, which meant that the guy had surpassed the results of his future colleague, who was tested before him. The guy literally stood with his mouth open. He didn't expect at all that he would be able to surpass anyone in the strength of his blow. The hero thought he had used a lightning strike like yesterday, but the power was incomparable. That's what working with the concentration of chi energy gives. Jong Nok-soo rushed to him with congratulations. The man shouted that it was incredible. In front of him was a Class A hunter. Only Class S was higher. His indicators started at 1,500. The young man asked if he could try again, and the appraiser replied that, theoretically, he could. But then he noticed that the guy had broken the device's shield and added that the next time, if Junsong had received it with such force, he would have already been dead. The man asked if Chen-su wanted another hit, and then started calling someone, while the guy was warming up his hands. After clarifying the information, Nok-soo apologized and said that there were no spare shields, so they would have to do it another time. Hyun-soo suggested moving on to the next test. They moved to the kicking test room, where our hero also showed himself very well. His result was 1,377, and the evaluator simply froze in place. A little more, and the subject would have moved to a new class. He entered the result into the table and, sweating profusely, explained that he only had a little bit more to go. Well, the guy scratched his head in confusion. The old man, on the contrary, was not delighted with the student's achievements. He reproached the rascal for not being concentrated enough. Otherwise, he would have already knocked out 1,500. The next test involved throwing a ball at the defensive boards from different angles. Noxu then tested the boy's ability to maintain high-speed movement while lacking oxygen. After this, the ability to breathe normally was restored, but the treadmill was turned on to maximum, measuring the pulse rate. Various tests and measurements followed one after another, and it seemed that the number of new devices would never end. They even tested the reaction and ability to dodge blows and various types of damage. This was the final test. Noxu was delighted and told the hero that according to all the results he corresponded to rank A, most likely, that is what he would be awarded, after which he congratulated Park Jong-soo. He leaned closer, and in a conspiratorial tone announced that after lunch they would be able to take the most important test, a combat simulation. For lunch, the guy went to the research center's cafeteria and was impressed that ramen was offered as the main dish. The prices for food after the factories were destroyed skyrocketed so much that Chen Su hadn't eaten normal food for 2 years, and he pounced on ramen like a madman. The master looked skeptically at the student gobbling up the noodles and asked if it was really that delicious, and he replied that it was the best food in the world. The heavenly demon raised an eyebrow and said that they also eat different kinds of noodles, but this was the first time he had seen one like this. The young man shouted that ramen was the best product in the universe and offered the patriarch to try it, but he got angry and called the student a brat. Having heard reproaches about the impoliteness of offering food to an incorporeal being, the hero headed to the necessary office. Opening the door, he froze. What he saw did not inspire hope that a pleasant cruise lay ahead. The previous subject left the room very battered. The one who woke up had many abrasions and scratches, and she was limping. Every step was difficult for the girl. It took incredible effort not to cry or groan in pain. Kim's assistant held her by the shoulders to keep her from falling and asked if she needed help. The awakened one shook her head, and the man offered to accompany the hunter to the office, where she would receive a document on assigning a class because she had done just fine. Our hero looked at this picture and thought again that now he would have to really strain himself. I wonder how this test would go. Jong Nok-soo was already waiting for him and told him that the system was created by the genius S-rank hunter Anderson Walker. Park Jong-soo walked up to the machine and prepared to enter. The evaluator reported that this system gives the most realistic feeling of a real battle with a monster. The guy looked at the complex equipment that took up almost the entire room, and he was clearly uneasy. Saying that damage received in the simulator would also have realistic consequences, the assessor put a special helmet on the hero and connected the equipment. In total, you will need to go through 10 levels. Since the rank is presumably A, the guy will start right from the 4th. His arms and legs are also connected to the device. The battle simulation began, and steam began to billow around the huge machine. So powerful was the energy being used. The first thing Chen Su saw was nature. His feet were on green grass that was completely indistinguishable from real grass. The bright midday sun shone through the numerous vines and tree crowns, and even the warmth of its rays could be felt on the skin. The old man was here too. Somehow he managed to get into the simulation along with his student. He looked thoughtfully at the mountains spread out beneath their feet and the flock of birds that someone had scared away. Somewhere in the branches, an animal resembling a black gorilla was hiding. This world was no different from the familiar jungles of Earth. The hero began to sweat. He decided that the simulation was very realistic. The patriarch, scratching his beard, confirmed that the person who created it understood the magic of mystical dimensions. It is used to deceive the enemy or hide the reality. Park Jong-soo became even more nervous. The heavenly demon added that for a master like him, such magic was nothing more than a cheap trick. Loud stomping and rustling of branches could be heard from the nearby thickets, and soon these sounds were joined by a deafening roar. The old man realized that monsters were approaching them, but it was not yet possible to understand which ones. It was some kind of monster with wings and a huge toothy mouth, which quickly attacked people. The heavenly demon raised his hand to strike. Yesterday he ran out of chi energy and had to stop fighting the monsters. I wonder how things will be today. Well, it turned out that in the simulation he remained incorporeal, even after accumulating a sufficient amount of power. While the master was thinking about how best to act in this situation, his student was already asking for an opinion on how he had handled it. The patriarch glanced in the right direction, and a bit of surprise was reflected on his face. It seemed the guy was not nearly as helpless as one might think. He concentrated his chi energy and delivered a devastating lightning strike that shattered the monster into pieces, his hand now covered in the monster's blood. Hyun-soo laughed joyfully, and when he realized that the teacher was watching, he asked him defiantly how he liked it. The master only chuckled. He already understood that the feast would not end there. Several more of the same disgusting creatures were rushing towards them. The patriarch uttered only one phrase, a lazy donkey somersault. The hero did not immediately understand that this was the name of another evasion technique. The ability to follow skills was activated, and under the shouts for the rascal to follow the order, the guy somersaulted to the side. The monsters tracked his maneuver, but were in no hurry to attack again, tracking the flows of unfamiliar energy. They were helped in this by a special sense and a third eye right in the middle of the forehead. By the way, what the monsters saw was far from pleasing. Distracted by watching the man, they completely failed to notice the threat from the opposite side and were simply trampled. A giant ogre appeared in the clearing. Even the heavenly demon had never seen such a large specimen before. Park Hyun-soo was even forced to lift his head up to examine his new opponent in full height. He did so just in time to notice a huge fist raised to strike him. Somehow the guy managed to jump out from under the blow, pushing off the monster's hand with his feet, but he didn't understand what to do next. The enemy was preparing to attack again, and it was necessary to think through not only a survival strategy, but also a counter move, and this was not easy. There was no time to think. The ogre struck again with his fist, and our hero with a terrible frightened cry jumped out from under the fist and tried to save himself by running away. He ran as fast as he could, but his movements were somehow incomparably slow, or it was a figment of his imagination, or a glitch in the simulation. While the hulking giant was following him closely, the young man began to call for the teacher to get a hint from him on what to do. The master rose into the air and, turning his back to the student, declared that a wonderful ability had appeared. To test what he himself was capable of, let him come up with something. The most sensible solution would have been to simply run away, but if the boy had done so, he would not have been given a class. He took a running start and offered the ogre a taste of his signature Class A kick, worth 1,377 points. It seems that having felt the power, the hero learned to control himself. The young man struck, but nothing happened. The monster continued to stand on its feet, and its skin was not damaged. It was difficult to understand whether it had worked or not, but the monster began to lean forward, looming over our hero. He took a few steps, trying to trample the annoying opponent, but it seemed the blow was no match for the ogre's power. The monster, although clumsy, knew its advantages very well. The monster grabbed the guy with both hands, like a vice. Having lifted the young man above his head, the ogre tried to squeeze him as hard as possible in order to then hit him on the ground, a win-win option. The huge bald head, although slow-witted, was quite capable of handling such a primitive task. Hyun-soo thought that if he lost consciousness, everything would be over, and with his last strength, he called out to his teacher once more. He was prepared for the question and advised distributing the chi energy evenly throughout the body, calming the breathing. He transferred his energy, the energy of the heavenly demon, to his student. It was impossible not to feel it, and the hero began to hope that everything would end well. Now it was necessary to release this most powerful force, and the guy prepared to carry out this difficult task. He succeeded. The monster's hands unclenched, flying into pieces. It turns out that it is possible to inflict damage without striking. The ogre roared shrilly, realizing that he was left without both upper limbs, and the young man froze in the air, not falling, his body still radiating streams of energy. But it was necessary to finish what had been started, and for this a kick would be quite suitable. The guy jumped on the bald head. He then kneed the monster right between the eyes using his maximum chi energy. The result was surprisingly excellent. The ogre was finally destroyed. and the hero moved on to a new level of the test. In the room where the testing took place, nothing had changed, but a rainbow appeared approximately in the area of the guy's navel. His internal energy was looking for a way out. Jong Nok-soo watched the events and loudly announced that if the hero was ready to continue, the 5th level would be activated in a few minutes. The evaluator thought to himself that he had never seen anyone break through the internal suppression system during a test. Then a female voice behind him said that the test subject was indeed very strong. It was Nok-soo's colleague from the association named Lee Mi-na. As the Class A hunter approached, the appraiser added that the hero had such great potential that he would still surprise them in many ways. He was surprised that the girl had already been sent here. The association received information about new talents quickly. Lee Mi-na didn't respond, but she thought that she simply couldn't allow such a rare fighter to be snatched away from under their noses. At this time, Park Hyun-soo was undergoing the cold test, envying his disembodied mentor, who had escaped it. The heavenly demon was amazed. Not every magician who possesses the technique of mystical dimensions can create an imitation of weather. Here they saw a girl in a fur cape who was heading straight towards the hero, screaming for help. The young man put his arm around her shoulders and began to find out what had happened and what kind of help was needed. The girl was silent, only trying to press herself against Hyun-soo as tightly as possible. Then the hero noticed that some kind of metamorphosis was happening to her body. Some unfamiliar energy began to spread from the beauty's mouth, and the situation began to take a completely unexpected and extremely unpleasant turn. A second later, the monster's eyes flashed, and it tried to attack the guy with its sharp teeth, which appeared instantly. Since the hero managed to move away from the bite, the creature grabbed him by the throat with its hands and tried to lift him into the air. A pair of wings were hidden under its cloak. Park Hyun-soo's eyes widened in surprise and tension. It was a surprise to him that the 5th level had a simulation of fighting vampires. Lee Mi-na watched the boy confront the monster and thought that the hero was very different from all the awakened ones she had met before. His impractical fighting stance reminded the girl of old martial arts movies, where only a young man could get that kind of stuff. He did some ridiculous jumping and knee lunges, but the amazing thing was that the technique actually worked. The hero dealt with the vampire quite effectively and quite efficiently, but as soon as she was defeated, an ominous laugh was heard. It was another vampire, this time a man, who congratulated the man on his victory and told him that he was a worthy opponent. The monster was unable to finish speaking, much less attack. A hole appeared in his chest. Hyun-soo quickly jumped behind him and struck him with his hand. The fist pierced the vampire's body right through. Even the old man who flew closer thought that the student was doing very well. The hero grabbed the monster's heart in his fist, and it began to slowly crumble into ashes. As we know, a vampire can only be destroyed in a few ways. The master praised Hyun-soo, saying that he was quite good. This was very unexpected for the young man, but undoubtedly pleasant. The evaluator declared the level passed, and the awakened person being tested was simply amazing in his skills. He added that if the hero was ready to move on to the next level, he should wait about half an hour. The young man thought about it, and then agreed. The sunset that day was simply stunning, the sun painting the windows of the research center in orange-pink tones of every possible shade. When the last level was completed, Park Hyun-soo staggered out of the real combat simulation rooms. He was drenched in sweat and could barely stand on his feet from fatigue, but he kept thinking that he could have done better. Chok Nok-soo greeted the boy and said that he did great. No other Class A hunter had ever passed this level. He added that the documents were ready and could be obtained at the office, after which he bowed respectfully, and the hero thanked the appraiser for his work. While the young man was waiting for the elevator, the man thought that in front of him was a unique person, who it seemed was completely unaware of it. The hero was unable to get to the right floor calmly. Lee Mi-na entered the elevator, which confused the guy quite a bit. She introduced herself and extended her hand, saying that she worked for the association, and Park Hyun-soo's mouth dropped open in surprise. The young man replied that he was glad to meet him, while the old man said that women would soon be lining up behind his student. They entered the office and sat down at the table. The girl suggested that they look at the contract that her organization was offering to the hunter. While the young man was reading, she informed him that it was better not to rush, but anyone would be happy with the conditions that the association offered to Class A hunters. Hyun-soo couldn't believe that now he too would become a hunter, and a high-class hunter at that, as if his life had been replaced by someone else's. He remembered that in order to get a support position, he had to leave a deposit for equipment, but now the organization provided a stable salary and bonuses for raids. Lee Mi-na said with a rather important air that this particular contract was tailored specifically for the hero. The old man, meanwhile, stared at the beauty and commented out loud on her appearance, noting that even their women were not nearly as attractive. While the young man was trying to finish reading, the master asked if he would sign the papers submitted by such a beauty. The girl could not understand what was wrong with his face and where such a grimace came from. The old man advised to review the conditions. Now everyone is dancing around the student. The guy said that he wants a contract not for 10, but for 5 years, and the amount of bonuses is twice as much. Just at these words, someone literally kicked open the door to the office and resolutely stepped inside, shouting that they were caught. The girl on the threshold put her hands on her hips and shouted that the association was again trying to foist a Kabbalistic contract on a new hunter. She looked menacingly at Lee Mi-na. She was embarrassed, not understanding why the huntress was here. The guy almost hiccuped from surprise. Hyun-soo hesitantly asked if the person in front of him was really a member of the Red Lions team, the best hunting team. The girl was surprised that he was so knowledgeable and leaned closer to Hyun-soo, confirming that she belonged to this guild, and her name was Ha Yurak. She apologized for interrupting the conversation. The young man assured her that everything was fine. He couldn't believe that he had met an S-rank hunter. The heavenly demon even floated, and with a carnivorous smile declared that this woman was also a sight to behold. His behavior was very strange. The beauty lounged on the sofa with a languid look, and declared that the Red Lions would offer the guy much more, regardless of what the association was offering. She started drinking Lee Mi-na's juice, who was outraged that the hunter had come to the association building, but she calmly replied that she was also a member of this organization. The patriarch said that this woman was very strong. He had never met anyone so powerful in this world. Ha Yurak said that there was no point in thinking about it, and that they should join the guild, while Lee Mi-na countered that the association had a monopoly on all portals in the country. The huntress objected that this information was outdated. The guild also received the corresponding rights. While the documents were being drawn up, there was no official disclosure, but it would be. While they argued, our hero watched the dialogue and did not believe that two powerful organizations were in conflict over the right to cooperate with him. Tired of the worries and tension, he sighed loudly and stood up. Both girls froze and fell silent. Park Hyun-soo said that they can stop arguing because he has already made a decision and is ready to voice it. Both beauties looked at him with the hope that they were in a winning position and he would join the right structure. At this time in the Ilcha Mountains, the clearing of the portal in which the young man's superpowers first awakened continued. There was much more water in it, and people needed special suits and equipment to engage in battle with the mermaids. They wore diving helmets and snorkels to help them breathe at depth, all of which significantly limited their movement. The fishmen were in their natural habitat, so they fought much more successfully. One of the participants in the operation realized that they were in trouble. The intelligence said that there would be large areas of land and some water, but the situation turned out to be just the opposite. Not only did the battle take place at sea, but the mermen also had a numerical advantage. This was clearly not a Class B portal. He decided that if special measures were not taken, the entire squad would perish. So he took the opportunity to call for reinforcements and turned to the leader. He had just entered into a duel with one of the monsters, but was forced to be distracted by a signal given by a colleague. He showed the hunters a signal to retreat, let them get up and go to dry land, and he would cover them, taking on the monsters. The sergeant major had a unique ability. the shadow clone technique, which could save the situation and distract the enemy. This ability could give them an extra 10 minutes. The spell did not work for a longer time. As soon as the clones appeared, the hunters began to carry out the order. The people came out onto dry land and everyone began to thank the elder for saving them. The hunter replied that when they came out of the portal, they would give his real body some beer. Here, colleagues in horror began to ask where the real foreman was and why he hadn't come ashore. Just at that moment, the leader of the squad, in his true form, emerged to the surface with the last of his strength. He stood up and showed his subordinates that everything was fine. There was no serious damage, and there was even some energy left. At this time, a powerful stream of water rose from the depths. It seemed as if a huge monster was rising from the depths. His jaws were so huge that the hunter simply froze in place, realizing that he would not have time to do anything. There was no chance of survival. And so it happened. The huge jaws snapped loudly, and the squad lost its leader in a split second. It was not a mermaid, but some kind of terrible sea monster. The hunter who had just spoken to the foreman screamed in horror. At this time, in the association's research center, the light was on only on the floor where the contract signing office was located. Lee Mi-na and Ha Yurak sat on the sofa next to each other. Both of them were upset and a little confused. It seemed that our hero's decision did not please them. The guy told the hunters that he would take some time to think about it, in case other, more advantageous offers came in, and there was no need to rush into signing a contract. He bowed low and told the girls that he was leaving his contact details with both of them and would be waiting impatiently for a call. After that, Park Hyun-soo turned around and headed towards the door, leaving Lee Mi-na and Ha Yurak in a state of shock. Both wanted to curse loudly, but they restrained themselves, only exhaling that the awakened one was far from as simple as they had expected. Both the association and the Red Lions Guild are offering a contract, and he is waiting for the attention of other organizations. It is beyond comprehension. This thought made Ha Yurak so angry that flames flared up around her, and she rose from the sofa and arched her back. At lightning speed, the huntress flew towards the doors, like a fiery projectile. It seemed that she would simply sweep away everything in her path. Lee Mi-na looked after her and thought that the girl hadn't changed at all, still as hot-tempered as before. The next morning our hero woke up in an excellent mood. The day was clear and fine. His room was in perfect order. The master demanded cleanliness. The portal continued to gape like a black hole right in the middle of the wall. Park Hyun-soo had obtained a new transcendental skill, Heavenly Demon Walk, and the word transcendental puzzled him a little. They were in the portal again. The hero asked the teacher what these transcendental skills were, since there were only 5 classes. He explained that these were special skills. The Heavenly Demon's Gate is higher than the human S-class, but many prefer to remain silent about the fact that the classification is not perfect. The young man expressed extreme surprise. The master explained that stance and correct movement are the basis of martial arts. Only after mastering these basics can one begin to study techniques. The old man asked to watch and remember. Given the student's skills, he would repeat it the first time, after which he began to show the first complex. He took a step forward, resting his foot on his heel, and said that this was the first stage called the appearance of the heavenly demon. It was reported that the young man had mastered the first set of movements of the heavenly demon's superiority gate, called the demon's appearance. A bright glow of energy appeared around the patriarch. He noticed that the movements should be soft and smooth. The student tried to track the movements, but nothing worked. The master was moving and not moving at the same time. At least from the outside, it seemed like the heavenly demon wasn't moving a single muscle, but he was definitely shifting. Taking a closer look, the boy realized that the teacher was taking steps, but they were enveloped in streams of energy so that they became invisible. Completely unnoticed, the patriarch appeared right in front of the disciple and declared that this was the appearance of the heavenly demon. The rest would depend on the situation. The guy was so surprised that his cognitive functions decreased and his understanding fell. The mentor said that he needed to concentrate better. He would show it again. but later. The second set of movements is called the flight of the heavenly demon. Let him absorb the information more consciously this time. The next moment, the old man rose into the air and began to move with small jerks that could be easily tracked. The young man screamed in horror that the teacher was flying, but how he could repeat it was completely unclear. The heavenly demon explained that one should ride the air like a dragon. In this way, one could appear behind the enemy and attack unexpectedly. The mentor rose into the air once more quickly, illuminating the trajectory of his movements with the help of chi energy. He stopped right in front of the guy and said that this is what a sky demon's flight looks like, and he noticed that the speed was much higher than when the old man was dragging him through the air. The patriarch became angry that the hero had not grasped the information, shouting that if he mastered the phenomenon and flight, he would be able to comprehend the first 6 techniques of his cult, crushing blows from the sky. There was information that the guy had received information about the transcendental skill, crush from the sky. The young man was completely unprepared for this, and the teacher enjoyed his reaction and whistled softly. Finally, the master shouted that he should stop grimacing and watch carefully. He would show the third set of movements. Saying that he was even more complicated, the old man began to walk in a special way, moving through space at the speed of sound. Soon he completely disappeared from sight. He was so fast, the young man absolutely did not understand how he could watch it. The mentor simply disappeared. He was nowhere to be seen. A message appeared that the young man's cognitive functions had dropped to 0 and the information had not been absorbed. A voice came from behind him, saying that this was the heavenly demon soul exit technique, and the hero screamed in fear, not understanding how the old man ended up there. He repeated once again that this was a special set of movements to get behind the enemy. Had he forgotten or something? The fourth complex was called the Heavenly Demon Soul Vortex, and the old man was going to demonstrate it immediately. All the young man managed to see was a bright flash of yellowish light, after which the teacher simply disappeared into thin air, or so it seemed. The flow of energy was so strong and the light so bright that the hero reflexively covered himself with his hands and closed his eyes. A little higher, at the top of the vortex, just in space, the heavenly demon stood proudly. He hoped that the student had learned his lesson. The guy looked at him with his mouth open. He again did not understand at all what exactly the master had done and what the meaning of his movement was. The old man explained that the name itself conveys the essence of the technique. One must spin so fast that the invisible vortex created will swallow the enemy's soul. The hero didn't understand anything. The teacher menacingly declared that this was the best counterattack. If the boy mastered Soul Whirlwind and Soul Exit, the following 5 techniques of crushing blows would become available. The young man asked if this meant that there were 11 techniques in total, to which the heavenly demon replied that there were 12, but for the last one had to master the 5th complex of the heavenly demon walk. While Hyun-soo was thinking that even if he mastered the superiority gate, the 12th technique would remain inaccessible, the patriarch began demonstrating the 5th technique. It was called the Descent of the Heavenly Demon Sovereign, and the old man's legs immediately began to emit an incredibly bright light, and he himself rose above the ground again. The power of the energy flow was so strong that our hero could not withstand the tension and screamed loudly. He was literally swept off his feet. The whirlwind lifted the guy off the ground and threw him back, turning him upside down in the air several times. He flew and thought that the mentor had only stamped his foot once, but his whole world, including his self-awareness, had turned upside down. Finally, Park Hyun-soo fell to the ground with a loud scream. He still couldn't find the inner strength to open his eyes. The heavenly demon proclaimed that one should rise up, then all others will worship and honor you. The young man only sighed loudly as the old man stood over him and shared his invaluable conclusions. At this time, equally important events were taking place in the association's office center, on which the fate of the city depended. There were many important people present at the meeting, and they were informed that in the last raid on the portal in the Ilch Mountains, only 4 B-rank hunters and 5 supports survived. The man in the suit reported that Sergeant Major Oh Dae-ho had died, This was already the third operation in this portal and again unsuccessful. He insisted that the intelligence department was not classifying the portal correctly, to which the gray-haired man countered that they had never been wrong about their assessment. The intelligence department workers insisted that they had the most accurate equipment. Why 5 Class A and 11 Class B hunters failed is unclear. Here someone, apparently very influential among those present, asked to stop the argument. Everyone fell silent. Some even rose from their seats. It turned out to be Li Mi-na, who also stood up from her chair and said that they could even fight among themselves, but that would not solve the problem. The girl put her hand to her chest and confidently said that she knew what to do in this situation. Park Hyun-soo woke up and sat up in bed with a loud scream. He clearly remembered being in a different place before he passed out. The boy sat up in bed and asked the master how he ended up there, to which the old man simply called him a disgrace. He explained that the young man had simply fainted, unable to withstand the training, a despicable weakling. The hero remembered that he really tried to learn the heavenly demon's superiority walk, but he doesn't remember what happened next. The patriarch explained that the walk of superiority allows one to move through the air as if on the ground. If he had shown it at full strength, the boy would have died instantly. The hero crumpled the edge of the sheet from an excess of emotions and declared that he never wanted to experience anything like that again. The master explained that right now he really wasn't ready. He would need a ki charge of at least 120 years. He had to start with the techniques of appearance and flight of the heavenly demon. The young man decided that he could handle this. He still managed to understand some things, so he nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, at the association's office center, the meeting ended and everyone went home to be with their loved ones. The corridors of the building were empty, but the issue raised remained relevant for someone who still hadn't left his office. Li Mi-na sat at her desk and worked on her computer, occasionally distracted by her own notes in her diary. She remembered how a gray-haired man at a meeting asked her to voice the solution she had to the problem. The girl suggested that the association consider the option of cooperation with other hunting organizations, which caused a stream of hate in her direction. Director Lee considered starting negotiations with the Red Lions, but even that raised a wave of indignation. Colleagues shouted that they had already given competitors the opportunity to work with portals, and if this was her way of working, then it would be better for her to resign from her position. Li Mi-na was the only hunter in the room. She understood that none of those present even showed their noses into the portal. For them, they were just objects of profit. The next morning, our hero left the apartment to resolve a number of household issues. He was heading to his favorite neighborhood. A message came that the support worker's salary had been transferred to the card. The hero was happy. He had been sitting completely without money for a long time. The first thing the hero did was pay Hyun-tae's hospital bills, after which the account was so low that he almost cried. The guy almost started banging his head against the wall at the thought that if he had signed the contract, he would already be rich. There were many offers from different guilds on the phone, not counting the association and the Red Lions, so he cheered up and suggested that the master go and eat. The old man asked him if he would buy those red broth noodles again. The boy replied that he would order 2 servings, for the teacher too. The young man didn't have time to finish speaking, almost getting a good slap from the teacher. How much longer could he continue to mock him like this? But the guy managed to jump back and was now laughing, happy that he had managed to learn something about the appearance of the heavenly demon. The old man said that there was no need to be arrogant and immediately hit him right on the top of the head so quickly that the movement was impossible to track. They approached a small shop. The doors were closed, but the establishment was definitely open. The young man walked inside, and the bell above the door rang loudly, announcing the arrival of visitors. There was absolutely no one in the room, and the hero began to look around among the display cases, trying to notice a salesperson or an employee. He greeted loudly, and a girl named Yoon appeared from the back room, waving her hand in greeting. Hyun-soo asked if everything was okay. Walking among the shelves with noodles, the guy chose ramen and had a friendly conversation about a part-time job on the weekend. The girl said that she had no choice. She needed to take care of her little brother and sister, and that required money. The guy didn't know too much about her problems. He just liked the saleswoman. Now he thought about it. Saying that he would ring up the goods himself, the young man went to the checkout. Yun thanked him, and she continued to put the goods on the shelves. Hyun-soo put in a little more than required, and saying that the money was at the cash register, headed for the exit. The girl happily said goodbye. The young man had already walked quite far when he heard Yoon calling out that he had forgotten his change. The hero replied that it was for her siblings and that he should buy something tasty. The girl smiled and rubbed her nose in embarrassment. It was a very kind and sweet gesture on the part of her friend. Then the old man attacked him, calling him a villain who was planning to buy a girl's heart for money, but the guy said that this was not true. He explained that Yoon, like him, lost her parents 2 years ago and is now raising twins, a brother and sister, on her own. The hero added that Yoon sacrificed her education in order to be able to earn money for her family, and he did the same. Immediately, there followed a hefty jab in the back of the head, with a shout that it was not proper for his student to sing his own praises. Finally, they came home, and Hyun-soo started cooking. Half an hour later, the ramen was ready. The guy ate the first portion so quickly that he didn't even have time to taste it. It's good that he prepared several at once. The heavenly demon looked at him skeptically, not believing that the dish could be so delicious. The hero explained that it was the best ramen in the world. The old man's eyes glowed red and blue, and he grabbed the student's hand wielding the chopsticks, stopping the movement. Somehow, he managed to magically pick up and carry the noodles to his mouth, and they didn't pass through his body, but ended up in the mouth of an incorporeal creature. When the dish completely disappeared into the teacher's stomach, Hyun-soo shouted with delight and surprise that he managed to eat. It was incredible. The heavenly demon was extremely pleased. He hadn't eaten for many years, and now he was delighted with the ramen. It was the most delicious dish, without a doubt. He patted the boy on the head and said that he had a wonderful student, and that he could even eat from his hands. Looking at the pot with the remains of the dish, the master ordered the hero to feed him properly. There were at least 2 more servings left. The young man was far from delighted when he realized that he now had another major inconvenience added to his worries. As the evening drew closer, the area where the store was located became quiet, and Yoon took the bus home, which was a long way. The girl was very happy, and, approaching the high-rise building, she was already imagining the children's reaction to the whole bag of food and goodies that she had managed to buy. Then a loud sound caught her attention. The girl looked around and screamed in horror. She did not expect anything like that. The manhole cover was blown off by a powerful stream of water, so much so that it bounced several meters away. The water gushed onto the street so quickly that passers-by had to swim to their rescue with loud screams. But the threat was hidden not only in the water itself, but also in the monsters that came with it. These were the mermaids already familiar to us. Armed with spears and harpoons, the monsters approached the people who simply did not know what to do in this situation. Those who were more resourceful chose to flee, while the less agile died in the first seconds. At the very top of the water flow, a hooded mermaid figure appeared, raising her weapon up and proclaiming that this world was now theirs. While her subjects were killing all the people who were nearby, the mermaid added that they would rule here according to their own laws. A portal similar to the one that had opened in the Ilcha Mountains now gaped right in the middle of a busy city street. Cars and houses were flooded with water, and among the waves one could see the rings of the tail of a giant sea monster that had devoured the leader of the raider squad. From time to time, the monster would emerge and feast on one of the people swimming past, as if it were cracking pistachios. Yoon froze in place. The water was still far away from her, but the prospects were the most unpleasant of all possible. At this time, the master and his disciple once again entered the portal in the middle of the room to continue teaching the heavenly demon techniques. The old man thought that although this dimension looked deserted, he always felt a powerful surge of energy in it. I wonder why he got into Hyun-soo's world through this space. The guy was just sharing his delight that the practice of energy circulation had completely restored him. The teacher explained that circulation also helps to clear the energy flow from negative emotions and illnesses. The young man laughed that this way he could forget about doctors. The old man became serious and ordered to forget about nonsense and take a stance to practice the appearance of a demon and the gait of a demon. Hyun-soo thought that although his cognitive abilities were not up to par during the previous training, he still managed to learn some things thanks to the awakened ability. Saying that he would try to reproduce what he remembered, he rose into the air and took a few steps. Soon, he had already successfully moved through space. The heavenly demon thought that the boy was really quite gifted. He had done so well the first time. Meanwhile, in the association's office center, events were unfolding in a far from positive direction. Alarms went off, and emergency messages began to sound throughout the corridors. People began to bustle about, announcing mobilization. A detachment had to be sent to save the townspeople from the invasion of monsters. Lee Mi-na thought that she had a premonition of trouble. If the events in the Kangong-gu area, then the Isaac Guild with the leader of the Panther Man Choi Hyun-woo should be there. She shouted that she was also heading to the scene of the events, and that they should send all the available hunters as reinforcements. The girl ran down the corridor screaming that without their help, the Isaac Guild would not last long. In the rest of the city, everything was calm for now, but who knows how long it will remain like this. The heavenly demon and his disciple finished their training and walked out of the portal into the young man's apartment. The master was in excellent spirits and invited his student to join him and rest. Soon everything became clear. The patriarch asked to prepare him a portion of that divine food, ramen. While the young man was walking to the kitchen with a saucepan at the ready, the teacher asked to turn on the magic lantern with the talking messenger. He wants to know what the news is. Saying that he had settled in well here, our hero turned on the news channel so that the master could quench his thirst for knowledge. They arrived just in time. The announcer was talking about a flood and a mermaid invasion in the Kangdong-gu area. The guy thought that these were the monsters from the portal in the Ilcha Mountains. Could it be that the third raid was also defeated? The old man suddenly asked if these were the same monsters that were in the portal where they had gone for an operation not long ago. Suddenly the hero felt sick. He remembered that in the area where the invasion began, Yun from the store and her family lived. He jumped out onto the stairs with such speed that he almost knocked down the entrance doors. It was necessary to save the girl and her loved ones. Our hero was rushing down the street and trying to figure out how to get to the right area as quickly as possible. It was quite far away. It was problematic to get there quickly by car because of the traffic jams. But if he could have run in a straight line, he would have made it much faster. But there were buildings on the way, and then it dawned on Hyun-soo. He decided to use the Sky Demon flight technique. In order to risk using this technique, the guy needed maximum concentration, so he concentrated. He started off so quickly that he left behind only clouds of dust on the pavement. But that was only the beginning. The young man moved along the street in huge leaps, pushing off from the roofs of cars and the walls of buildings. His speed became so high that his hair could easily leave his skull and take off on its own flight. The further he went, the bolder and higher the hero's jumps became. He not only mastered the technique of heavenly flight, but also improved it with each jump. Soon, Hyun-soo was jumping across the rooftops of houses, not even stopping to catch his breath. He was in a great hurry. The main thing was not to get hit by the wheels and not to fall, but the concentration became better and better, so the young man did not get into trouble. The old man flew after him. He was very pleased and commented out loud on the success of his student. Meanwhile, the monsters methodically destroyed passers-by, the water became larger, and they moved to the neighboring streets of the area. The Panther Man was already here, fighting his opponents to the limit of his abilities, guarding the guild's territory. Unfortunately, his efforts were not enough. The fishmen swallowed the inhabitants of the area literally whole. Choi Hyun-woo's fans watched from their windows, believing that their hero would now sort everything out. He jumped onto the pole and shouted to the other hunters from his guild to fight confidently and try not to panic. A huge, fat man with the same sword shouted to the captain that it goes without saying he was the local butcher, Banbo Gum. His words matched his actions. The guy wielded his weapon so skillfully that the mermaids and their parts flew in all directions. He was cheerful and quite confident of victory, but it turned out to be a mistake. A new enemy attacked from behind the hunter. The sword was too heavy to react quickly. Bogum noticed the attack too late to react adequately. But help came from an unexpected place. Someone loudly and whistlingly released the bowstring, saving a dawdling colleague. The exploding arrow instantly destroyed the mermaid who dared to sneak up on the hunter. The explosion was very precise and powerful. A blonde on a jet ski, armed with a bow, shouted that instead of the flimsy boat, they should have taken a more powerful vehicle. The girl pulled the string of her bow again, this time loading 3 arrows into it at once. It seemed she could shoot at several targets at once. 3 fishermen received an urgent message at once. Each of them was supposed to explode to hell in an instant.